How you doing, Richard?
Good. Stefan, how are you? Thanks for
Yeah.
chatting.
No, it's great to speak to you today. I'm really enjoying the show so far.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kick things off. I mean, I loved the opening scene to this. It's such a dark, brutal kind of beginning and introduction to your character. Do you remember your thoughts when you first kind of got that first script in and first read that kind of opening and what you remember thinking?
Absolutely. It was one of the sort of main reasons for taking on the role, I think. I'd been chatting to Greg and Neil sort of briefly as I got the scripts, and I remember reading those first couple of scenes. Originally, they were written slightly different, but the intention was always kind of the same. It always came to sort of same conclusion in the back of that ambulance with Cafferty. And it gripped me right from the start. I immediately thought, this is something different. This is something dangerous. It's
Mm,
gritty. We've immediately,
mm,
just launched into this sort of very
mm,
dramatic world that Rebus is from. And aside from all that sort of excitement, that sort of storyline, the sort of pace of it, I thought this does so much for me as an actor to take this on and get the opportunity to sort of
mm,
launch this character in this way, because it just says so much about him. It says so much about his potential, his capability. It says how dangerous he can potentially be. It says a lot about his sort of mentality, about how he works, about how he deals with things, about how he's willing to kind of cross the line. Um, if he thinks, the end justifies the means. So much was being done that when we set the character up like that, I mean, you've seen the first three episodes, so you can tell
mm,
me if it works or not. But it does so much in terms of you understand sort of his sort of base psychology and how he
mm,
at any point has the capacity to just snap.
mm,
Or so when he's confronted with someone, I don't really need to do that much because it's already been said
mm,
what he might do or how he might deal with any given circumstances. So I just thought this is an excellent
mm.
way to kick off a show because it just does so many things. I thought it
Yeah.
was incredibly exciting. I thought I don't even need to read much past this. Obviously, I did. I read all the scripts that I was given, but I thought I could agree to do this right off the
Yeah.
base scenes here, and it was just
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it was a great start. I mean, there's so much. You've got obviously this kind of great sort of wealth of material when it comes to this character. You've got the kind of books, you've got the kind of TV series at the turn of the 21st century. But when it comes to taking on a role like this, when you've got that many kind of reference points, do you almost have to actually, I mean, I'm just interested in knowing your kind of research and what you kind of drew from, or do you almost just have to treat it as just this script and this version? Because I always feel like sometimes when there's such a wealth of research and reference points, you can almost get lost in it. It can almost lose some of the instinctive elements, I suppose, to acting.
It's funny you should say that because I did. I was all over the place. I was absolutely scattered to the
Mm,
four winds when it came to my sort of research and prep because
mm,
I had Ian Rankin's source material, which is great, books that I love. So much of it, just a wealth of
mm,
material and information. I had Greg's scripts, which incredible. I love his writing, always have done. We've got this incredible new project of his, and then I've got all of my own take on things and things that I want to bring to the character and ways that I want to do things. And yeah, I had so many points to reference that trying to knit them all together became, and I wanted to bring, Ian's world into Greg's world and try and marry the two, try and knit the two together. But yeah, I remember it being, yeah, quite a difficult process, and to the point where I had to sort of cherry pick, I suppose, the information, the uh, sort of parts of the books, the sort of the character work from the books that I wanted to bring into the show, and sort of park that world while I got sort of more into to Greg's scripts and building the character for what was to become
mm,
his adaptation and ultimately his sort of version of the world of Rebus. But yeah, amazing, incredible, fortunate position to be in, to have all of this at your disposal. But yet sometimes it can be a lot, and sometimes it can actually sort of impinging and getting your way. So you have to start sort of becoming a bit sort of more concise in how you approach that, I think.
Yeah.
But absolutely,
Mm.
such an advantage to have it there available to you as
Yeah.
a
But I mean, because the character, and I mean, the whole story is built on a kind of gritty realism and a kind of on a very much, it very much feels like it's taking place in the real world. But I'm
yeah.
interested to know when it comes to you sort of talking about research and preparing for a role. I often find with actors, you kind of want to get to the truth of a character. So you want to maybe understand about detectives and actual the kind of the real life inner workings of a kind of the law enforcement in Scotland and stuff like that. But a character like Rebus is so ingrained into the kind of fabric of like storytelling in terms of books and literature and TV. Do you almost find that you have to, your reference points and your kind of the way you approach it becomes quite cinematic as opposed to being like realistic, if that makes sense?
No, I think it makes sense, but no, I don't think that's the direction that we went. But I understand why you would say that.
Mm,
I think the realism and the authenticity was something that was very important to us,
mm,
sort of off the bat. It's a way. Greg's so sort of rooted in the truth of the world and the sort of honesty of it. He's from a very similar background to Rebus, so he's sort of writing what he knows and
mm,
the world that he comes from. So it was important that we sort of maintain as much authenticity as we possibly could for the characters, for the story, for the sort of that sort of world that we were creating,
mm,
in terms of the language, the dialect, the colloquialisms that these characters were using, um, the accent, and a lot of it's given to us in the writing. I think the way that Greg writes, you can sort of immediately sort of connect to and find the sort of honesty of these characters. So I think the realism of it was something that we were really, really, sort of gunning for. The realism of Edinburgh, the realism of Fife, and these characters and how they sort of function day by day, rather than trying to take it too much in a
mm,
sort of, or thinking too much of a sort of cinematic
mm,
aspect of it. Our DOP and our director were kind of doing that anyway. The
mm,
style with which they were sort of shooting it and the way that they wanted it to look and the sort of aesthetic that they wanted it to have was just such an incredible idea, and I think they ultimately got to do that we were able to sort of have all those elements in place in terms of the realism of it, and a sort of really great cinematic look and feel to it. So I don't think we lost. I don't
mm,
think we really compromised one for the other.
mm. No, you didn't. I thought it felt incredibly gritty and real. And one thing I loved as well was I think you just touched upon it as well. The kind of there was no compromising on the localized language and dialect and colloquialisms. It's unapologetically kind of Scottish in that regard, which I know my Scottish father-in-law will love when it comes on TV. Was that very important for you in reading the script and going into? Because I imagine as an actor, you must read some scripts sometimes based in Scotland that don't feel Scottish, if that makes sense.
100%. And it was there in the writing, and I know that sometimes you'll compromise on it. You'll compromise on that for the sake of
Mm,
clarity or being understood out with that region.
mm,
And I said to Greg, I was like, you have given us this very real world with a beating heart, and the language is there and the dialects there. It's like it was very important to me, and I know that it was very important to him, that we keep that and we preserve that, because it's so much part of these the people who were portraying. It's so much part of where they come from. It's so much part of the place. It's so much part of Fife. It's so much part of Edinburgh. This is how people live, and it's how they talk. And I think we often compromise that when we're doing, television, sometimes when we're doing theatre as well. But if things are going to be seen out with the region it's shot in, you tend to lose a lot of the sort of feel of it by, being over emphatic or cleaning up the language or clipping your T's and your D's, and it becomes unauthentic because it's not how they speak. It's just not how they talk to each other. So when I start to do that for the sake of, you know, clarity or for the sake of being understood by people who don't have an ear for the accent, for the dialect, then I start to believe in it a little less. So by preserving the authenticity, I think you preserve the realism of it and the realism of the people that, you know, that we're portraying in it. And I think it does a lot for Scottish television and, you know, our sort of culture as well, because it is unapologetic in how we deliver it. And I think that it should be. And I think that things that are written like this from specific places should kind of always have that. Like, why, you know, why change it? I think we just have, you know, be a little bit more aware and have a better sort of capacity for listening, especially regionally. Do you know what I mean? So I love that about it. I think it's one of the great qualities about the show.
Yeah. I think it's obviously such a huge kind of undertaking as well to be that kind of title character in almost kind of every scene. I just wondered, when you kind of finish a shoot like this, or even any of your big shoots, or even just a stage play or anything, do you have any kind of shoot routines, post-project routines after a big wrap? You know, is there a certain holiday you go on, or a certain takeaway or restaurant you go to? Is there anything you do to go, when something big is kind of done?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do something. You have to decompress. Rebus stayed with me for quite a while after we'd finished shooting. I think my girlfriend frequently called me up on, you know, still having the accent, still having certain mannerisms, still saying "a" or "Ken" at the end of sentences. So I know that it hung around for a while after we finished. So I think decompressing and just allowing that to sort of, you know, sort of to get rid of that is important. It's funny, I often end up being quite really run down after a project finishes, whether it's theatre or television, because I think you do something where you just sort of build up such a sort of defense against things because you have to get it done, and then when it's finished, you just sort of like collapse in a heap. But yeah, holidays. I like photography, so I often just go and shoot something. Yeah, just relax and chill out.
And never mind the kind of end of a project. I mean, obviously this year is the end of kind of Outlander, which is at the end of an era. Then when that sort of finally airs. I'm interested to know, as an actor, when you kind of have been involved in something for kind of a number of years, as much as you love a project, as much as you love a character and the people that made it, and as much as you owe to a project, can there be a sense of relief when something's over? Like, you're kind of given a position to kind of, there's more of a freedom now to what your calendar's looking like. I mean, I remember I interviewed Maisie Williams years ago from Game of Thrones, and she said the first thing she wanted to do when it was over was dye her hair green, because she'd spent 10 years and she couldn't change anything about the way she looked. I just wondered about when you do finish something, is there almost a sense of like excitement about the kind of, about what's to come, I suppose?
Yeah, I think there's always a sense of excitement about finishing something and having maybe, you know, a free slot in your calendar or some free time coming up that you start to sort of fantasize about how you might fill that up or what you might do or what projects you might take on. But sometimes you get there and it's quite anticlimactic, or it's not what you thought it was going to be. But I don't know how we're going to feel, actually. We've been talking about this a lot on set. We've just started filming season 8 a few weeks ago. We've been talking about it, and I think the read-through was way more emotional than I think anyone thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
There were genuine there was sort of a genuine sentiment, a sort of a genuine sentimental feeling around the table, from the actors, from our producers, from the crew. And I think that sort of opened people's eyes as to how we might feel when we finish. It's given us so much. We've been afforded so much sort of privilege and opportunity from having such security from shooting a long-running show, that we've almost been able to cherry pick how we fill our time, what we do in our free time, how much holidays we can take, you know, traveling or taking on projects that you know that we really enjoy, or things that we just think are just generally going to be quite fun to do. And that's a real you know, I've been really grateful to be in that position because it's a really fortunate position to be in, you know. So I think when the show comes to an end, it might feel like there's a bit of a, I don't know, a bit of an emptiness, a bit of a vacuum to be filled, and I don't know what that's going to look like. I thought I did before we started season 8. I thought, right, here we go, last season, season 8. Let's let's hunker down, let's get this done, let's make it the best it can be, and then that's it. You know, we'll have, you know, another chapter opening in our lives, and our careers are all going to go in new and wonderful directions. But I don't know how we're going to feel when it's done. It's been such a part of our lives for the last 10 years, you know.
It's going to be one hell of a rap party. You have to get Sam Hewen to provide all the whiskey, though. I've some of it here.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I did a sort of a junket, and I got some nice whiskey he sent me as a sort of afterwards that he sort of did on his own whiskey place.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey you guys!
Hey!